Hello and welcome. My name is Maggie Draper, and I am a Program Advisor with Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. Welcome to today's information session on the journey to permanent residence in Canada for international students. If you are interested in staying in Canada after you graduate from your program of study, this information session is for you. Before beginning, I would like to remind everyone that this is a recorded presentation, and the information that I am sharing is accurate as of today, September 30th, 2023. Immigration policies and programs can change, so please visit our official website on a regular basis for up-to-date information. Let's get started. In today's session, we will be discussing key information you need to know to be prepared to apply for permanent residence. We will talk about how a student can transition from full-time study to full-time work after graduation. We will highlight important immigration concepts that are relevant to the PR programs and that will support your application process. We will explain how express entry can be your pathway to permanent residence. This presentation has been shared with you to follow along. The slides contain hyperlinks that will bring you to our web pages with more detailed information. So let's begin and turn our attention to working while studying in Canada as an international student. Having Canadian work experience will be beneficial to you, especially if you want to apply for permanent residence, as work experience is a requirement for most economic immigration programs. Prior to beginning working, you will want to review the conditions that are written on your study permit to ensure that you have the authorization to work. The first way that you can gain work experience is through on-campus employment. You can work on your school campus as long as you are a full-time student and have a valid study permit that states that you are authorized to work. There is no limit to the number of hours you can work on campus. However, many universities have their own internal policies that limit the number of hours that can be worked. Your student advisor will be able to provide you with information on your institution's internal policies. Moving on to off-campus employment. It is important to note that there are limits to the number of hours that you can work. During regular school semesters, you may work up to 20 hours per week off-campus if you are registered as a full-time student. It is important to understand that working more than 20 hours per week off-campus is a violation of your study permit conditions and can impact your future immigration applications. For those who are only eligible to work up to 20 hours per week off-campus, you may work unlimited hours off-campus during regularly scheduled breaks. Each school sets their own scheduled breaks. Please speak with your institution's student advisor for guidance. And lastly, you can gain work experience through a co-op or internship opportunity. Some study programs include work experience as part of their curriculum. These work terms are often within your field of study, which will allow you to feel better prepared for the job market after you graduate. You may need to apply for a co-op work permit if you did not receive one when applying for your initial study permit. So let's take a moment and think of the future. You've completed your studies. What happens now? Once you receive your completion letter or final transcript from your school, you must immediately stop working while on your study permit. Your next steps will depend on the following scenarios. Do you want to leave Canada? If yes, then you must leave Canada before your study permit expires or within 90 days of receiving your letter of completion or final transcript, even if your study permit is still valid, whichever of these scenarios comes first. Do you want to stay in Canada? Great! If you wish to remain in Canada, then you must either be accepted to a new study program or apply to change your status to become a worker or a visitor. Understandably, many of you who will want to work following graduation, and most of you may be eligible to apply for a post-graduation work permit, the PGWP. This permit will allow you to gain valuable Canadian work experience, which could support your future permanent residence application. So what is a PGWP? A post-graduation work permit is a permit that is issued to recent graduates from eligible Canadian post-secondary institutions. This permit is an open work permit, which means you can work for any employer in Canada. The length of time that the permit is valid for will depend on the length of the study program you completed. For programs that are longer than 8 months, but less than 2 years in length, we may give you a PGWP issued for the same amount of time as your program length. For example, if you completed a 1-year program, you may receive a work permit for up to 1 year. For students that complete educational programs of at least 2 years in length or more, we may give you a PGWP that is valid for up to 3 years. And just to clarify, it is important to remember that when IRCC is determining the length of the PGWP, we will be looking at the length of the educational program, not how long it takes you to complete the program. It is also important to note that this document is issued once in a lifetime and may not be renewed. If you plan on continuing your studies in Canada, it is important to reflect on your long-term plans and when would be the best time to apply for this work permit. This may be now, or it may be at a later date when you have completed all further educational programs you wish to pursue. In order to receive this permit, you must apply within 180 days of receiving written confirmation that you have successfully completed your program. If you apply for a postgrad work permit within 90 days of receiving written confirmation of your program completion and your study permit has not yet expired, you can begin working full-time hours immediately after submitting an application for a PGWP and awaiting a final decision. If your study permit has expired, but you have a study permit extension application in process, you can still apply for your PGWP, but you will not be able to work while your application is being processed. All right, before we get into the permanent residence programs, I would like to briefly review a few important immigration concepts that you may have heard or read about. The first, and definitely most important concept to understand, is ensuring that you always have valid status in Canada. As a temporary resident, your status is confirmed by having a valid visitor record, study permit, or work permit. This is different than a temporary resident visa, the TRV, in your passport, or an electronic travel authorization, the ETA, both of which are used for travel to Canada. If you apply to extend your time in Canada, it is most likely that you may at some point hold what we call maintained status. Maintained status refers to a person that has applied to extend their status in Canada before their current status expires. If this is the case, your current status will be maintained until a decision is made on the new application. An important note, if you decide to leave Canada while your extension application is in process, you will lose your maintained status. So to avoid this, we always encourage you to apply for an extension at least 3 to 4 months prior to your current status expiring. So many of you will want to travel outside of Canada to visit family, friends, or to simply explore another country. Before you leave Canada, we encourage you to review what is required to come back into the country, such as the aforementioned TRV or ETA. Because the requirements vary, IRCC has created a Come to Canada tool, which asks you a few questions about your current situation and will advise you on what requirements you may need to re-enter. And the last thing before we get into the permanent resident streams, let's talk about NOC, the National Occupational Classification. The NOC is an organizational system used by the Government of Canada to classify jobs. Every profession, whether it's the cashier at your local Timmy's, your teachers, or even my job, have a 5-digit occupation code attached to it. Think of it as a giant dictionary of occupations that are divided into a 6-level system representing the training, education, experience, and responsibilities needed to practice a profession. This system is commonly referred to its acronym TEER, T-E-E-R. The TEER can be identified as the second digit of the 5-digit occupation code. The 4 tier categories in the black box on the slide are the ones that make you eligible for the federal stream of express entry permanent residency programs. These 4 categories are what we call high-skilled occupations, and they generally require post-secondary education or experience in a skilled trade. Even if you are not ready to apply for permanent residence, you should know what codes are required under the different permanent residence programs, especially for express entry. So now that we understand a little bit more about the NAT system, let's move on and talk about what documents you may need for your permanent residence application. Okay, so we're preparing for PR. What do? Everyone must prove their language ability by taking an approved language test. Language tests are used to determine speaking, listening, reading, and writing ability in one of Canada's official languages, English and French. The test is a requirement, even if either of those languages are your primary language. Your language test scores will be equated to the Canadian Language Benchmarks, the CLB. Further information on CLB and details on accepted language testing can be found on our website. Your test results must be less than 2 years old when you complete your express entry profile and when you submit your application for permanent residence. If you completed your highest level of education outside of Canada, you may be required to get an educational credential assessment. This needs to be completed by an IRCC designated organization in order to confirm what level the foreign program is equal to in Canada. High levels of education can make you a desirable candidate, so make sure that your highest level of education is recognized. This assessment is not required for Canadian degrees, diplomas, or certificates. We would also just like to remind you that there may be some upfront fees required when getting a language test or educational credential assessment. Okay, most permanent resident programs will require work experience. IRCC will refer to the work experience requirement in terms of full-time and part-time hours required. IRCC refers to full-time work experience as being a minimum of 30 hours per week for 12 months, which is equal to 1,560 hours in a 1-year period. Programs will also recognize part-time work experience. This would be equal to 15 hours per week over a period of 24 months. If you're currently looking for employment, Job Bank is the official Government of Canada website that is catered to both international students and employers. Job Bank is not only a platform to search for employment, the site also consists of job matching services which can help students get in touch with employers who can support them on their immigration journey. Okay, Express Entry. Express Entry is our flagship pathway to permanent residency. It is an online application management system used by IRCC to manage applications through the 3 different permanent residence streams: the Federal Skilled Workers, Federal Skilled Trades, and Canadian Experience Class programs. Former international students are great candidates for Express Entry because of their age, education, language ability, Canadian work experience, and established community networks. The first step to EE is to create a free Express Entry profile. This profile is valid for 1 year, and it's important to always keep it up to date. Once your Express Entry profile has been created, those who meet the criteria of 1 or more of the 3 federal immigration programs managed through EE, the FSW, FST, or CEC, are automatically entered into the Express Entry pool of candidates. When a candidate is accepted into the pool, they are given a comprehensive ranking system, CRS, score. based on the various criteria, such as your age, educational level, work experience, etc. IRCC regularly holds draws where the candidates with the highest CRS scores will be sent an invitation to apply for permanent residence. Only once a candidate has received their invitation to apply, they can submit their PR application. Okay, now we've covered the basics. Let's dive into the programs. First up, the Federal Skilled Workers Program. To be eligible for the Federal Skilled Workers Program, you must have at least 1 year of continuous work experience in a Tier 0, 1, 2, or 3 occupation within the last 10 years. This work experience counts even if you were studying in Canada at the same time or if you completed this experience while abroad. For this category, the language requirement is high. You must have a minimum score of CLB 7 in each of your tested abilities: speaking, listening, reading, and writing. We consider this to be an intermediate to advanced level of language. The minimum education requirement is a secondary school level or above. As you are all international students, all of you should meet this requirement. This is the only express entry program that makes education an explicit requirement. The Federal Skilled Workers Program also has its own point system that you have to fulfill. Further information on the FSW grid can be found on our website. So let's move into the second program, the Federal Skilled Trades Program. This program requires 2 years of work experience within the last 5 years in one of the designated Tiers 2 or 3 skilled trades occupations that are listed on our website. A quick example of these could be electricians or welders or even bakers. The language proficiency for this category is slightly lower, at a CLB 5 for speaking and listening and a CLB 4 for reading and writing. There is no specified educational requirement, but you must meet the job requirement of the trade. If you have a diploma or certificate, this may help improve your rank in the express entry pool as you can gain points for education. And lastly, you will need to have a job offer for full-time employment or have a certificate of qualification in one of the designated Tier 2 or 3 occupations, which is issued by a Canadian, provincial, territorial, or federal authority. And last but not least, we have the Canadian Experience class. For the work experience component, you will need to have 12 months of skilled work experience completed in Canada within the last 3 years. This work experience does not need to be continuous. The language proficiency, candidates must have a CLB 7 if your experience was in a Tier 0 or 1 position. For people with work experience in Tiers 2 or 3, you only need a CLB 5. There is no education requirement for the Canadian Experience class. However, as previously mentioned, completing an educational credential can give you additional points for your express entry profile. And a reminder, all work experience completed while you were a full-time student cannot count towards this work experience. This is a great program for those of you working for an employer in Canada while on your PGWP. So, those are our 3 economic immigration programs. Now that it's been mentioned, let's talk about the point system that is used to assess express entry candidates. This system is called the Comprehensive Ranking System. So the Comprehensive Ranking System, or CRS, is broken down into 2 categories: your core points and additional points. For each category is valued at a total of 600 points, combining for a total of 1,200 points. The core points are determined by factors such as your education, work experience, and age. If you are curious to see what your potential score could be, we have the Comprehensive Ranking System calculator tool on our website. So let's review the additional points. This is where 50% of your CRS score comes from. You can be awarded these points in a multitude of ways. First, a provincial or territorial nomination. This can get you up to 600 points. You need to visit your current province's immigration website to find out more information on how to receive a nomination. If you have a valid job offer, you can receive 50 additional points for a tier 0, 1, 2, or 3 position, or 200 points for an executive position, which is tier codes start with 00. Remember to visit Job Bank, where you can connect with Canadian employers and improve your chances of receiving a job offer and securing employment. Completing your post-secondary education in Canada can give you extra points. You can get 15 points for completing a diploma or certificate program of 1 or 2 years. Or you can get an extra 30 points for completing a diploma or certificate program of 3 years, a bachelor's degree, or a postgraduate degree. French proficiency can boost your score with an additional 50 points. Strong scores on both English or French testing can gain you anywhere from 25 to 50 points. And finally, even having a sibling with Canadian citizenship or permanent resident status in Canada can gain you 15 additional points. Candidates who have high CRS scores in the express entry pool and are eligible for one of the programs will receive an invitation to apply. The minimum CRS points needed to get an invitation to apply varies. You can look up the scores from the most recent round of invitations on our website. A more detailed breakdown of how points are awarded is also available on our website. This is a good time for me to share with you the recent announcements made by IRCC regarding category-based selection for express entry. Category-based selection is a new way of selecting candidates through the express entry program. Its aim is to support a range of economic needs and priorities by creating categories for selection that rely on key attributes like ability to communicate in a specific official language and work experience in a specific category. A category-based round of invitations, we invite candidates to apply for permanent residence who are eligible for a specific category established by the minister to meet an identified economic goal. For 2023, we chose these categories: French language proficiency, healthcare occupations, science, technology, engineering, and math occupations, trade occupations, transport occupations, agriculture, and agri-food occupations. We encourage you to visit our website for further details on eligibility for category-based rounds. So now that we've spoken about how to boost your scores and how the express entry system can apply to you, let's talk about what happens next. You have a great CRS score and you've received an invitation to apply. Great. Now, what happens next? You have 60 days to submit a complete application. A complete application means that all supporting documentation must be submitted with the application. It's a good idea to start gathering these documents prior to receiving your ITA, as they may take some time to collect. The documentation must be submitted electronically through your online account. And a friendly reminder, if any of the documents are not in English or French, they will need to be translated prior to submission. I'll give you a minute to read this slide and get a sense of what is typically required for a permanent residence application. Keep in mind, your express entry profile will expire after a year. If you still wish to be considered for express entry, you will need to create a new profile. All right, before we finish talking about permanent residency, I want to quickly touch on what funds you will need to immigrate. Application fees are $850 for the primary applicant. If applicable, it is the same fee for a spouse, and $230 for each dependent child. If your PR application is approved, you will need to pay for a right of permanent residence fee. of $515. Again, if applicable, it is the same fee for a spouse. Additionally, for express entry applicants in the FSW or FST programs, you must demonstrate that you have enough money to support yourself in Canada. For example, a family of one will need to show that they have just over $13,757 of available funds. The larger the family, the higher the funds required. These numbers can be found on our website. I will point out that if you are already living and working in Canada with a valid job offer, you will be exempt from this requirement since we know that you already have income. All right, let's just say after all of this, you aren't eligible for express entry. There are still plenty of ways to continue your time in Canada. There are alternatives to the express entry system. You can gain more work experience through one of our temporary residence programs, such as the Temporary Foreign Worker Program and the International Mobility Program. Alternatively, you can look into another federal program that may work for you. If you are interested in living in specific areas of Canada, the Atlantic Immigration Program or the Rural and Northern Immigration Pilot Program may be right for you. As well, the provinces and territories all have specific permanent residence programs depending on their needs, and you may be eligible for those. Further information on those programs can be found on the provinces or territories' immigration websites. Francophone immigration is a great pathway and has many benefits. And those benefits are not just for those whose primary language is French. It can also be for individuals who may speak it as a second language in any capacity. As I previously mentioned, French speakers can gain additional express entry points. These additional points may be the reason that you receive an invitation to apply. You also become an asset to employers. As French is one of Canada's official languages, employers seek out French-speaking candidates to better serve their clients and to tap into new markets both inside and outside of Canada. Employers and candidates alike can benefit from the mobilité francophone. Mobilité francophone allows for eligible French-speaking candidates to have access to work permits that are timelier and more cost-effective for the employer. IRCC supports 14 specific communities across Canada that are set up to make sure that Francophone newcomers and their families feel at home. However, there are many other communities across Canada that will support your Francophone life should you choose to settle there. More information on French immigration paths can be found on our website. For all newcomers in Canada, there are agencies throughout the country that are here to help you adjust to life in Canada. These agencies can help you or your family members find employment through receiving interview training, employment counseling, and connect you with employers associated with the agencies. You can also access additional information and courses on features of Canada that you may be unaware of. This includes accessing healthcare, what laws and rights you have, educational opportunities, and more. As a permanent resident, you can benefit from free English or French courses so you can improve on your current language abilities. There are agencies that are specialized in providing support for Francophone newcomers as they integrate socially, economically, educationally, and culturally into their new home in Canada. For more information, our website is an invaluable resource when it comes to understanding Canada's immigration system. For case-specific inquiries, you can always contact our Client Support Center or through our web form. As well, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, where we share information that may be useful to you. I would like to thank you all for taking the time to tune into this information session, and I wish you the best of luck with your time in Canada. Thank you.